Amid a lull in fighting between the U.S. and Iran, mediators across the Middle East are expressing optimism about renewed diplomatic efforts to end the war. Right now, Qatar and Pakistan are working to revive the interim ceasefire deal, with one regional official describing the progress as significant. We'll see. President Trump told reporters on Air Force One yesterday that Iran asked for the attacks to stop and wanted more discussions.
Iran took a beating over the last 14 days. And they asked us very nicely, please stop. Let's meet. And that's what we are right now. We'll see what happens. If we don't make a deal, we go back to the same thing.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman later denied that Iran had offered to negotiate in return for a pause in U.S. strikes. Meanwhile, mediators have also been working with Iran and Oman over the past several days to hammer out an agreement for ships to pass safely through the Strait of Hormuz, which remains one of the biggest sticking points in the ongoing war. Here on set with me, retired CIA officer Marc Polymeropoulos. He's an MS Now national security and intelligence analyst. So once again, we are at a point where mediators say, okay, significant progress being made to even just bring people back to the table. And yet, even if they're back at the table, the central issue remains the Strait of Hormuz, which wasn't exactly an active issue before this war began. And so I think we're forced to once again be in the position of questioning, what was it all for?
Right, Ali, is this Groundhog Day again? I mean, the idea of, some of these mediators saying there's, quote, significant progress. If you look back, we've heard this time and time again. You know, the central question right now, which was not one of our war aims or goals, was reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But remember, if we go back to some type of agreement, you know, this is a red line for Iran. And maybe the Trump administration will say that, you know, they will pay some sort of transit fees or something of the notion that will kind of obfuscate the fact that Iran is going to control this. But that's their red line. They want to control it. I don't see how there's going to be progress. Meanwhile, of course, on the military side, you have really interesting comments or leaks in the press from both Admiral Cooper, the CENTCOM chief, and then Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, basically saying there's no real military options left. So we're stuck. We're in a box. I would love to come on and not just be a critic. I'd love to give you, Elliot, give you a solution to this. I'm kind of stuck here as well because we are in a pickle right now, and I'm not sure how we go forward in order to essentially promote U.S. interests at the very end.
If there are no military options left, and I say that from the perspective of there is this looming threat on the Hill of what would it take to do ground troops or something else. Is it true that there are no military options left, or is it just that there's now what you're talking about, these interesting leaks trying to urge the president away from that?
So I go back to something Henry Kissinger said many years ago about Israeli politics. This is the Middle East, so we can say this. He always would say that there's no Israeli foreign policy, there's only domestic policy. Yep. That is exactly what's happening in the United States because you've raised the idea of military options. Sure, there's a military option. That's ground forces, ground troops. That's not politically palatable for the Republicans, and I don't think, with the midterms, 98 days away, Trump is not going to go near that. The Republican Party would revolt. And so domestic politics matter. So we're in a box. There are things that we could do that he just cannot. Americans are not going to tolerate casualties, certainly not right before the midterms. And so that's where we are right now. Again, there's huge decisions to be made, but not great options.
No, we talk about the cost all the time. The human cost, of course, very much in focus last week as the president received bodies at Dover Air Force Base. And then, of course, on the Hill, the cost of the war and what Congress might have to pay for it. But then also, I was in Michigan on a reporting trip this weekend, and time and again, voters, both for and against the president, were telling me, prices seem really high, and it is a central focus. You know, the president's going to have multiple focuses today because Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is scheduled to meet with Trump at the White House this morning as he pushes for more U.S. military support and renewed efforts to end the war with Russia. Ahead of the meeting, Zelensky says he'll share evidence that Russia is helping Iran target American assets in the Middle East by providing satellite imagery. The Kremlin has denied aiding Tehran. President Trump was actually asked about this yesterday.
Zelensky says that Russia is giving Iran satellite imagery of U.S. bases in the Gulf to help them target. What can you do about that?
Well, we'll find out if that's true. I'll ask Putin about it. We'll find out. Hasn't had much impact because we've knocked the hell out of it, what do you think? If that's the case, look, they gave Venezuela a lot of equipment. Venezuela had all Russian equipment. How did that work out? Not too good. So they may be giving, but if they are, it hasn't worked out because they have no army, they have no air force, they have no navy, they have no nothing. So it hasn't worked out. Well, I don't think they've been doing been very unimpactful.
And President Trump is also set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, with the war in Iran and a possible peace framework for Lebanon expected to top their agenda. Trump told reporters yesterday he and Netanyahu are largely on the same page about Iran, but also dismissed the prime minister's reported concerns about selling F-35 fighter jets to Turkey, saying those decisions are Trump's alone. And Trump also argued U.S. military action changed the course of the conflict, saying Israel would have been, in his words, terminated without American strikes on Iran's nuclear program. Marc, let's take these in two parts, because on the Ukraine front, we'll come back in a moment. But when it comes to Israel, Trump is trying to say we're largely aligned on the same page. Certainly the work being done on a diplomatic front in Lebanon is notable and significant, especially given the backdrop of feigned significance, seemingly, for U.S. Iran talks. But what are you most watching for today as Netanyahu and Trump meet? Of course, against the backdrop of the fact that they're all here for Senator Graham's funeral.
So first of all, Ali, this is a tale of dueling bromances and different kind of who's up and who's down. But we'll get to that in a second. On the Bibi visit, look, this is a campaign stop for Netanyahu. Israeli elections are in October. And so while certainly first and foremost on the agenda is Iran, what to do with it, the Israelis absolutely want us to go back to kinetic action. They want us to focus on the Iranian nuclear program. I don't think they care one lick about the Strait of Hormuz. But Netanyahu is fighting for his political life. You never count him out somehow. And so he's here, in essence, to get a campaign endorsement from Trump. That's what he's running on back home. Trump knows this, and it's fascinating, and he's going to play with them a little bit. I mean, if you want to get into really kind of the nitty-gritty of this, Trump is going to make Bibi suffer a little here. We'll see a lot of pressers. We'll see a lot of positive comments on it. But the main focus in terms of the substance, will we go back to kinetic activity against Iran? What are we going to do about the nuclear program? That's what the Israelis want. That's not on the top. Despite what he says, that's not on the top of the U.S. agenda.
Certainly. And we also know the role that Senator Graham used to play when it came to Netanyahu and Trump, sort of as a background negotiator. There's even some previously unreleased documentary footage of a documentarian who had been following Graham around. And you see these phone calls of Graham trying to push action in Lebanon from the U.S., just saying, oh, I'm going to get Trump on board with this. And even Netanyahu saying, well, it doesn't really serve our interests right now. Just really a fascinating look behind the scenes at the ways that people were coordinating their impact and influence on the president. That was fascinating. Right. But another place that Graham had a lot of push and pull came on the Ukraine front. He was very clear-eyed about their role as a U.S. ally and the ways that the U.S. should be supporting Ukraine. Frankly, clarity in a way that certainly J.D. Vance, the vice president, didn't have, even as a senator. Certainly now as vice president, but also the president himself doesn't have that clarity necessarily. And so as we watch this dueling bromance, I love that term that you use, what are you expecting to see from Zelensky?
So he's on the ascendancy here in Washington. It's amazing what Senator Graham, and this is probably one of his finer moments, you can debate on his legacy, but he convinced Trump that Zelensky and Ukraine were winners. Trump is vain. That's what he's only going to back someone who's on top. And so Zelensky arrives with Trump thinking, well, hold on a second. The Ukraine is winning. The Ukraine drone, production is quite extraordinary. These are kind of heroic figures. This is where Trump is thinking now. And so, does this matter? Sure, because the U.S. is still providing intelligence support. Now, I think Zelensky and the Ukrainians are smart. They realize that, this could be fleeting. Trump could flip on a dime. But if you look to that horrible Oval Office meeting of a year plus ago, compared to now, Zelensky's in pretty good shape now. And again, I use the dueling bromances because kind of Zelensky's on the ascendancy, Bibi not so much. It was flip-flopped just a short time ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's always up and down. Right. You're riding the seesaw pretty perpetually here if you're a world leader trying to find your footing.